Thanks for tuning into From Nothing, where we hear from proven health and wellness founders on how they actually got started. On this episode, we speak with Nick Soman, co-founder and CEO at Decent. Decent has raised $18 million from notable investors like Menlo Ventures, Foundation Capital, and QED, and is on a mission to provide affordable health insurance for all. Today, we talk about playing ball with regulations from the outset, being a missionary, not a mercenary when it comes to transforming healthcare, following and fixing incentives, Decent's latest creative move to get affordable health insurance out in the world, hiring teams of people to help fill your blind spots, and as a tech person, not looking like a jackass in healthcare. We've known Nick for a while now, and every time with him is interesting and fun. We think you'll think so too. So I have a fun linear history of Decent that I've tried to cobble together. The earliest date I could find was February 8th, 2018, where you published on Hacker Noon, "This is Decent." And you described it as, "Our new company, Decent, is building a decentralized peer-to-peer healthcare protocol on blockchain technology." So that's February 8th. When did you actually start working on this?
That's a very good question. So I started working on this in probably November 2017. I had left my job as the growth lead at Gusto. I had gotten excited about blockchain technology, but to be candid, I was also ready to start another company. And I had told the founders at Gusto, who are awesome, I'm going to start another company at some point, but I think I can help you to get your growth team off the ground for a bit. And I stayed for about 14 months and did just that. So I think I was intrigued by, the promise of blockchain technology. I still am. I think it's still part of our future, though in ways that are more boring than anyone who follows blockchain could ever imagine, which is kind of how I wanted to use it in the first place. And I'll tell you a little bit more about that. But I had decided to leave Gusto. I was sitting at a WeWork in San Francisco, and I was trying to figure out what my next company was going to be and doing some marketing consulting for some friends, actually including Jason King, to call out a throwback name that some folks may realize. He was sort of a guy around the Techstars program who has some wonderful qualities and also some interesting qualities, and he has become a friend. And so, he had actually gotten me a little bit into Bitcoin. He gave me some Bitcoin, which was very nice of him, but I discarded the technology because I was like, I don't want to do something that's fundamentally around speculation, and I just don't think it's ready for prime time. In the meantime, I'm paying more for health insurance than for rent for my family of four in Mill Valley. And I thought, this is a problem I can sink my teeth into. It's a problem that comes back to family because it turns out I'm the only one in my family that's not a primary care doctor. My mom is, my dad is, my sister got that degree, most of my uncles and aunts are, and I grew up hearing mostly about the importance of compassionate patient care and then how the rise of big insurance companies has ruined compassionate patient care. And I remember being about 12 years old, and I was sitting at the table with my dad, who's somewhat soft-spoken. At that point, he'd become, after 30 years of primary care practice, he was the chief medical executive of Group Health Cooperative, which is a big 600,000 member HMO in the Pacific Northwest. And he just says, at this point, he's in charge of the doctors in the hospitals. And he said, I don't think my counterparts on the insurance side really care about the patient. And that sort of stuck with me. And in part because of that feedback early on, I didn't become a doctor. But when it all started to come home to roost, and I'm paying this ridiculous amount for health insurance while trying to find a problem I can be passionate enough about to stick with long term, I thought, there might be something here. Squinted and could see a world where you could use blockchain to more efficiently move money around without large, bulky human organizations that ultimately are creating more cost that just gets passed back to the patient. So with that ill-formed idea, I was like, I'm going to do something. At that point, I was really sure about the health insurance side and pretty sure about the blockchain side. And I would say that is still where I am today. After a lot of wrestling with, what are we really solving for? I think we came to the conclusion that we needed to solve for more affordable health insurance because there was nothing else that felt as meaningful for us. I had gone through my own idea maze because I know you are thinking about this a lot in healthcare, and I don't mean to digress, but one of the things that is hard about this space is that it isn't until you get into healthcare that you realize how many of the incentives, not all of the incentives, are fundamentally aligned in something like SaaS. If you create a SaaS business that saves companies money and the companies are buying the product or the service, then those incentives are relatively aligned. In healthcare, you're dealing with a situation where you're usually not working with the same payer versus end user of your product for a variety of reasons. Pricing is extremely opaque. So you don't have the preconditions for some of the things that would just seem to make a lot of sense. And I needed to wind my way through that. If you haven't run into Nikhil Krishnan yet, he writes exceptionally well about this stuff. Yeah, he wrote our Series A, announcement, which we totally paid him to do, and he knocked it out of the park.
It was the best Series A announcement I've ever read.
It was really good. Yeah.
I'm glad you really liked it. I liked it too. But what we wanted to get at is, there are some really misaligned incentives here. And I started Decent in part because I couldn't find a way to start a company that I believed could be as impactful if I didn't find a way to directly compete with or even replace the payer. The challenges are so manifold in healthcare whenever you get any third-party payer involved that I'll just give you a couple of examples. You can start a company that offers wellness benefits and the end user is the consumer. And then you can find out that the payer is not interested in paying for that, either because they don't believe that it will have a health benefit, or often because people change jobs every 3 or 4 years. And therefore, even if there was a 4 or 5 year health benefit, the payer is going to go, well, it's probably going to land on somebody else's balance sheet. So we're not going to fund that. You could go after a much more expensive intervention. Not only are you going to run into some of those same issues with payers, but then you've kind of limited your market size. And I don't know, for me personally, like I'm in this on a mission and I want to make things more affordable for people. And so that got us to kind of the payer. I still think that there's some, blockchain possibility here, though. I want to quickly tell you a funny story about raising money. So I'll take it back to the temporal sequence I was in. I go and I start as an EIR at Foundation Capital. We have lots of interesting internal conversations. I kind of go, no, I really think it's health insurance. And at the time, I was getting pressure from some VCs I won't name. What would it look like to rebuild conspicuous consumption on the blockchain? And I was like, I couldn't care any less about that problem. In fact, I like you less for having brought it up, and I wish you'd leave the room. And so this is the thing that I wanted to work on. When we first went out, we raised money, and I did over-index a little bit on the blockchain part of the pitch. And it was a time when if you could be semi-credible, and I would put myself in that category as an entrepreneur that's had a small exit to a company that people have heard of, which is Napster, people are going, oh, you have sort of an idea of how this technology could be applied. Like, here's $8 million. And that's actually kind of what happened for us. And it was great. What's funny is you fast forward that to our next Series A raise, and I'm really, really happy with the investors we landed on. But we raised money for a health insurance startup at the beginning of a global pandemic when nobody was quite sure what was going on. What was so funny to me about it is I put the blockchain stuff that we'd actually done in the deck, but most of it was proof of concept. Most of it was, okay, we've established a way that when people make healthy choices, we can reward them and they won't need to connect a credit card or anything because we can actually do it with blockchain. And I thought it was kind of cool. It was the kind of thing that, if I'd had that in the seed deck, I probably would have raised $20 million. But we came back to some of the same investors about it. And I remember we got feedback from our friendlies. They said, that's really interesting, but I think you should move that to the appendix, because blockchain had become absolute, anathema to VC investing at that time. Then I moved it to the appendix, but I was still like, but I'm proud of this. And they'd say, take it out of the deck. So, you're dealing with the ebbs and flows. This is why we started Decent. And I think, Patrick, if you talked up our genealogy a little bit, we have had some of our challenges. We've had challenges from a regulatory standpoint. We've had to work through product market fit issues. We've had to now target kind of a new segment. Continuing to stay focused on that mission of affordable health insurance for all is the only reason we're still around. And I want to echo something that you said early, which I very much agree with. I don't really ever want to work on anything else. I love this space. I'm finally at a point with it as an entrepreneur. And I think probably I'm just also old, which really helps, but not really. I'm 41. But I told Anna, my wife, who you may remember, I was like, I've never had this feeling before, but if for some reason Decent didn't work out, and we've got money into 2023, so I think we're going to be fine. But if it didn't work out and all went to heck tomorrow, I would just start Schmeeson the next day. And I would try to do exactly the same thing. And I've never been part of a company like that before because I was so painfully aware of some of the real blind spots and the unresolvable systemic issues. I'm sure we'll have those, but what I find is that it's so meaningful to work on this problem and this problem space that, I get it now. I feel more connected to my parents now, and I only want to do this.
Well, thank you for the backstory, the run through. I'm going to pull you back into the moment where I think you were like, I want to do health insurance. something blockchain,
Yes.
see what's there. I think I'm going to land on like the payer side. I want to get into that part of the ecosystem. You then have a conversation with some VCs. You go in and you're an EIR at Foundation.
Yep.
What's your first step?
I knew that I couldn't start this company on my own. And so I made 3 key hires. The first key hire, I said, I'm not credible talking about blockchain because I literally just found out what it is like a year ago. So I need to hire somebody who's got the chops to do it. So we did. We hired my original co-founder, who unfortunately is no longer with the company. Brilliant guy, MIT PhD, good human, and he absolutely checked the blockchain box. So that was the first thing. I also knew that I work really well with a guy called Richard Luck, who was the co-founder of my first company. I have always wanted to start another company with him. So I called him up and he became co-founder number 2 and left his job at Amazon again to work with me on a wild scheme. We looked at each other and realized, and this is probably important for your audience, it's so tempting as a tech person to go, I'm just going to come in and I'm going to apply my technology to this problem. We needed a Sherpa, and we were really lucky to find a Sherpa in the form of a woman who we now have established as a co-founder, a woman named Molly Moore, who's my chief health plan officer. She's worked in healthcare for 30 years. And unlike so many people that I've met who are in that space, she hasn't been defeated by the system. There are so many people that have worked in healthcare so long, and you want to learn from them. What we're looking for, Molly was the original version of this archetype that has become our healthcare hiring archetype, is people that have been around the system long enough to know how it works, but their fundamental reaction is let's blow it up and do something better, as opposed to either this can't be done or, hey, wouldn't it be easier if we just focused on eking out a margin, just like the other PBMs do. And so finding Molly was absolutely a godsend. We'd be lost without her. And I felt like we had the right people around the table. And we started to step into kind of the next phase of healthcare startups that's very unique, which is you don't have anything if you don't have regulatory approval in healthcare. So we started going, well, our ambition is to launch a national or global health insurance, blah, blah, blah. But we got to start somewhere. And we made an important decision, which is we care more about getting a health plan off the ground for a limited number of people than things we might or might not do in the future with a protocol, which who the hell buys a protocol? So we started looking at where we would need to be and landed in Texas because Texas overall is pretty business friendly.
Got it. So you knew you're going to become a payer. People probably around you and you yourself were like, well, I need to build a team because the Sherpa one, like Molly, sounds incredible and her pedigree seems incredible. So you're like, I need to do that. Was it obvious who you needed to hire?
No, because it went upstream from what I wanted to do. I wanted to hire Richard, who I love working with. And at the end of the day, we have somewhat similar backgrounds, except he's the techie guy and I'm the talkie guy. And that would have been so easy to do. And I see so many companies that start out in healthcare making that mistake. I think given what we wanted to pitch and what at the time we wanted to build, we could have gone without a blockchain hire, but it would have been us trying to learn it on the spot. And I think we wouldn't have been able to raise enough money to get to something even resembling escape velocity, given our ambitions to build a payer. That was probably right. The Molly thing was certainly right, but like, let's be real. And I'll even put myself in this category. It's not super fun when you're 39 years old to hire somebody who's just going to tell you all the ways that you're stupid and you know nothing, even when that's exactly what you need. And the way Molly does it is wonderful. Another additional shout out to her. She's a former championship player and coach for the Rat City Roller Girls, which is a roller derby league. And she throws elbows and she cusses like a sailor and she's incredible about how she does it. But it wasn't obvious. When we first met Molly, I remember thinking, fuck, like I'm going to have to put up with learning so much from this person and never being the expert because there's no world where I know as much as she knows. And I think that was a little bit humbling, but ultimately it was the right call.
Okay, so you have this all-star team, especially this all-star chief health plan officer, which maybe she
a title we made up. Yeah,
a title you made up. Yeah.
Yes.
Was it a quick decision to we are going to design a health plan?
That was a decision that had already been made. I want to stay focused on how we did this, but I think the why we did this is important. I knew I wanted to work in healthcare for all the reasons we talked about. I made a rule after my first company. I don't want to work on problems that don't have the following characteristic. I'm a somewhat emotional dude, so this isn't a high bar, but I want to work on problems that I can start crying if I think about the depth and the pain of this problem. And I have so many friends, including the situation I've been in myself, that have struggled to be able to afford meaningful health insurance coverage, that we kind of knew we wanted to do that. It was when we brought in Molly that we started to get some sense of the how.
So then diving into that how, like, oh my God, I want to design a health plan? Question mark,
Yeah.
question mark?
Yeah, no, I want to design it. Let's take it from first principles. If you want to make healthcare more affordable for people, you can either work on things that don't require a third party payer. But in my mind, those aren't the things that bankrupt so many people in America. That is the number one leading cause of bankruptcy. If you want to work on some of the hard stuff, you got to get in bed with or you got to create a payer. So we'd sort of made that decision. If you're going to have a payer, you need to have a health plan. What is wonderful about Molly is that she's been around the space long enough that she was able to, in her mind, assemble a bunch of best practices that have worked for other folks, but nobody's really put together in the same way. This is conversations with my parents too. We started learning some of the dirty secrets. There are two different categories of dirty secrets around healthcare, I would posit. The first is the dirty secrets of the perverse incentives, and I'll name one of them that's gigantic. It's the impact of medical loss ratio. And I just want to talk about this a little bit. You may know this, but this is super, super important. For a traditional health insurance company, and I hope that you can hear, I haven't used that term because we are not a health insurance company. You are beholden to something called medical loss ratio. It means that depending on the target market, you have to spend 80 to 85% of premium dollars that come in on care, or else you have to give the money back, which net, I think, is a good thing. And it sounds like a really good thing because it means that these carriers can't just keep all the money. But the problem is it really disincentivizes innovation because at the end of the day, these are big companies, typically public. They're looking to maximize their return. And you've just told them, if you make your processes more efficient, it doesn't matter because you have to give the money back, which is brutal. So instead, what they do is they do what my 4-year-old Benjamin does when I take him to the store and I say, you can have one donut. He picks the biggest one because he's going to get 20% of one donut. There's no shot at 2 donuts. And so that's what these carriers are doing. That's one category of these misaligned incentives. The other thing is the actual drivers of cost, which is just something that people do not understand at all. Molly thankfully did, and the rest of us have learned. So we made a decision. We're not going to become a health insurance company because we don't think that we can innovate the right way. We have to find a different structure to do it. We've gone through a couple different ones. One is a self-funded one. We're actually launching a PEO, which I'm super excited about in the near term, but it's fundamentally around the same idea of let's bring small businesses together and help them get the benefits and the advantages of big companies. That's all we're doing. The second category of things people don't understand is the actual cost and profit drivers for the big players in the space. I knew from my folks, and I knew from Molly, health plans don't lose money on primary care. Health plans lose money on super expensive specialty care for 1 to 5% of their population. The primary care doctor's role is not what you think it is. The primary care doctor's role is to be a friendly face and help you kind of manage your care for sure. But what they're doing from an economic perspective is they're controlling something called steerage. That is the most important thing to understand about any health plan. It's where does the member go when they need the expensive care? The entire HMO model was built to put primary care doctors at the center of care, just like group health, so that when you needed specialty care, they could go, yeah, well, we already have a built-in hospital system. You're going to go down the hall and you're going to get care, and they've optimized for what is the right balance of serving a health plan and helping the hospital make money. But by making those part of one system, they have that total control of steerage. And so we said, we don't think we have anything if we don't have control of steerage, because no one is going to sign up for a health plan they've never heard of before unless it's meaningfully more affordable than what they can currently get, and the people that are on it like it. So that became the thing that we were looking to solve for. What we did, and I'm really pleased with this part, we started to partner with, not employ, direct primary care doctors. And I know you know a lot about this model. The beautiful thing about direct primary care for the patient is that they stay healthier, they're way happier. We have a net promoter score of 79 in an industry where the average is 14.
It's crazy.
Some of that is the service that we provide, but we mostly stay in the background and when spoken to, it's really about the relationship between people and their DPC. And the only real economic innovation we created is let's just take the DPC fee and bundle that into the cost of the health plan and have the whole thing be 35% cheaper than you can get elsewhere, so that we can tell the consumer, you get a plan that's 35% cheaper. It includes unlimited primary care from your personal doctor, which is how we sort of pitch DPC. Economically, though, part of how it works is that we build a narrow network around the DPC. And because they're not part of an HMO, because this is this rebel alliance of doctors, I love DPCs, that have decided to get out of the HMO system and typically won't work with big insurance at all, when we can come to them and say, we're not just getting cheapo locations, but this is the balance of cost and quality. And we ask that when you refer out, you refer to this limited network. They're happy to do it because they're not already kind of in bed with a health system that requires them to send that person down the hall. And that has been Decent's number one economic advantage, has been not so much that when people get more primary care, they have less downstream issues, though that's true. Not so much that we initially targeted self-employed people who tend to be a relatively healthy population, but much more, we are able to work with these DPCs to route people to a narrow network so that the whole plan saves money when specialty care is needed.
You have this like cascade of decisions, which is, or kind of realities that we're running into, which is we don't want to be a health insurance company. So that's out for those perverse incentive reasons. We need to have a handle on steerage because that's how we effectively reduce costs, is by routing people to the appropriate places. So we need primary care at the center of it because that's typically the best way to steer. How did you first hear about direct primary care? Were you on the hunt for primary care and then you ran into it? Like, how'd you get there?
I honestly feel like this is such a love letter to Molly, this whole section, but on her first day in the office, she walked in and she drew a picture of what she was thinking our health plan might look like. And it was concentric rings. I still have this very ugly picture. She's not a good artist. And in the middle of the health plan was direct primary care. And she said, hey, no one has scaled this model in my mind in the right way before. I know you've looked at DPC a lot. There are a lot of people that have taken it as an absolute that there can be no commingling of DPC and insurance. And it's very tempting to think that because there are a lot of hardline DPCs that go, it's normally the line that I'm sure you've heard is you wouldn't pay for, an oil change with your car insurance. So why are you doing this? We had to work with a set of forward-looking DPCs that understood that we're not a health insurance company. Legally, we're like, actually not. This took a lot of convincing. It's not like we found a different name for it because they've all been bashed around. And so many doctors, like my parents, have been made miserable by the rising expectations of health plans, especially when they're in the HMO structure. So we convinced them, we're really not an insurance company, but we do believe that you're the essential component to affordable care that actually keeps people healthy. And, Molly kind of drew this picture around it. And then I still remember we went out to Texas, we had this dinner and I felt like I was being kind of made in the DPC mafia because a lot of these folks early on had been like, I saw the word insurance. I read your weird blockchain ideas, you fucking weirdo. And I don't even know about this. We said, look, let me pitch this to you. We're going to pay you your rate and we're going to send you patients. And pretty much everything else, we just want you to do what you do now. And the reason that works is because you have to understand the needs of some of these doctors. And I know who I'm talking to, so I know you know this stuff, but so many of these doctors, and I think my dad and my mom would have embraced this model had it been around when they were struggling. They have left the big insurance system, but they don't really know how to do marketing. And I know there's a need for services that can be created around that. But one of those services is we were able to go to them and say, we're just going to send you patients. We ask you to do exact same thing as you would always, except for when they do need care. We want you to refer out to a network. And oh, by the way, we know that you care about where people get sent and you also have pretty good connections. Who do you think should be in our network? Is there anybody that you are used to sending folks to? And this works because typically roughly half of the DPC's patient panel is uninsured. So they're paying cash pay rates. And so DPCs have more knowledge than I would have expected on where to go to get a relatively affordable MRI, the kind of common stuff. So we were easily able to go, do you know where we can send people in network? And then imagine the door that opens when you go, not we're some random California health insurance something, but Dr. Larson told us that you're great and we would like to make you part of our network and we'd like to pay you fairly. That part worked for the network build out.
I'm kind of picturing this decision tree, which is you've gone down to, we are going to have DPC at the center to help with steerage. We're not a health insurance company. We're like something else. You've found a legal entity structure that's okay.
Yep.
Bring in the regulatory garbage into this. At what point are you like, okay, we need to start jumping through hoops?
Oh my God, we had to jump through hoops from day one. It really came down from knowing we didn't want to be a health insurance company. And if you don't want to do that, there's some really limited options. The first decision you need to make is, do we want to be able to call ourselves insurance? And I had one of the most like gut-wrenching phone calls of my life with my dad, because he actually counseled us to do the opposite of what we decided to do. He said, son, having been around insurance for all my life, it pains me to say this as the dude that used to run an HMO, don't call yourself insurance. When you call yourself insurance, you have to follow all of these regulatory guidelines that are set up to work against new entrants. And he was totally right about that. But I couldn't get comfortable with the customer development research we kept doing, which was people want to be able to say they have insurance. There will be a massive company that probably uses the health sharing model to go out and offer something that looks and smells a little bit like health insurance, but doesn't actually make assurances about you being covered in all cases. At that time, I didn't want Decent to be that company. So that meant that we needed to find a regulatory structure that would allow us to sell something that's called insurance, but wasn't an insurance company, which is harder than it sounds. As soon as you start engaging with regulatory, you realize that you have two masters. You have three if you consider your own business ambitions, but you know, if you want to make God laugh, tell them your plans. The other two are the state level regulators and then the federal regulators. And as soon as we said, okay, we think there's something really interesting about the self-insured model, the Trump administration passed some loosening of the constraints around the self-insured model. And I remember sitting at, Foundation, and I was so excited that day. I was like, oh my God, we found our in. This looks like a shot on the Death Star that hadn't been possible before, because they took this sort of musky old construct that had been used in the 70s in some poor ways that would let you band together small businesses as one big group in a self-insured model. And they said, we believe that that can really help people get more affordable health insurance. So we're going to make two changes. One is, historically, you've only been able to serve one industry at a time. And we're going to make it so if you're in one geography, like the state of Texas, you can serve all industries. Secondly, we are going to allow self-employed people to be able to come into these plans. And that's a big, big deal, because self-employed being able to participate in group health plans comes back to some language in ERISA around what an employer is. It was a gigantic change. And I remember thinking, all right, this is our shot. And to fast forward a little bit, we said, this is the model. Okay, let's make a big old spreadsheet. Turns out that, call it 70% of states in the country will ultimately allow us to do something like this, but some of them will let us do it now, whereas others will let us do it in a few years. You're interested in the how. One of the hardest things we needed to do, and this was just pretty weird, and I think I'll talk about the role of luck in startups. These version of this self-insured, it's called an association health plan. It actually requires an association, and the association cannot be owned by the startup entity. There actually can be no contractual relationship between them, because it's set up to avoid people just, spinning up things and siphoning a bunch of money and running away. We got very lucky in retrospect. I had done the South by Southwest accelerator pitch a couple years ago, and I was literally going, okay, we've decided that we're going to go in Texas. I know almost no one in Austin. Oh, wait, there's that one dude. Oh, yeah, he was my coach for the South by Southwest accelerator. It's a guy named Mark Nathan, who's completely wonderful. I hit him up on LinkedIn, not even an email. And I was like, yo, we haven't talked in 2 years. I'm doing something kind of weird. I know this is a ridiculous question, but do you happen to know of an association that might be open to partnering with us on this weird idea that I have? He said, not only do I know one, but I just stepped down from the board of this association, and we've been trying to solve for affordable health benefits because we did a bunch of surveying, and that's the number one thing that our members said that they wanted. So he introduced me to a woman that was running that association, series of ridiculous lucky events. She's like, yeah, I'm actually trying to figure out what to do with it. And I said, we're not allowed to take it over, but can we work with you and partner to bring this out to market? And that's what we did.
Wow, that is crazy lucky.
Yeah.
It sounds like there were two strokes of luck. The first one was the Trump administration with the new loosening up of association health plans. And then you actually found an association who was like, timing was perfect.
I think the second one was really lucky. The first one, and there was luck involved, but a lot of it was just trying to really figure out, where can I find a chink in the armor of this existing system? And there's luck involved, but we easily could have decided to go after a different, chink in the armor. And given what would happen with us down the line from a regulatory standpoint, it's possible that we would have been even luckier. But I think the extensible event is kind of, more than any industry I've been in, this favors the incumbents. It favors the incumbents because they have massive lobbying bodies, whether that be pharma or hospitals or insurance. Those are like 3 of the top 4 lobbying bodies in America. So I'm not going to say they're controlling the regulators, but they have a lot of influence. And so it is helpful to find something that's changing from a regulatory perspective and to ride that wave. And I think one thing we're a testament to is that has been a rocky ride. But because we're a nimble startup, we were able to get off at the starting gun, get several hundred people on the plan who really loved it, and then get the confidence that there was enough of it there that we could adapt as regulatory shifts started to happen. And so I'm not speaking around this. I'll quickly fast forward. The reason we're launching a PEO now is because in November of last year, I probably was about as cocky as I'd ever been as a startup CEO, because our product had really started to work. It was selling really well. We were on track to have several thousand members on plan on January 1st. And our friends at the Texas Department of Insurance came to us, in November in the middle of open enrollment, and they said, Nick, it's nothing that you have done, but there's these shifting tides at the federal level because this whole Trump administration push has been challenged in a court of law. And at the end of the day, we're just not comfortable with you selling to the self-employed because we think that that part is going to be struck down or has already been vacated. And that was a real blow. I am and was so excited about this thing that we'd been building, and the team had been like executing like gangbusters. And in the aftermath of that, without getting into the whole deal, because I do want to follow your line of questioning, we were able to discover that we could hew to our mission and band folks together using a PEO model and end up with a lot more flexibility and a bunch of other advantages versus even the old model that we've been using before.
Can you actually go into that decision process? Maybe shed as much light as you feel comfortable shedding of how did you get to, I mean, I'm sure this is the oh fuck moment.
Oh yeah.
Like our target customer just disappeared.
Yeah. And I'm happy to talk about it. Yeah. There was like an oh fuck 3 days. It wasn't a moment. I ended up writing about this online, and I wrote, about that this had happened. We'd gotten a bunch of sad and in some cases angry feedback from customers because they wanted the thing that we were selling. I'm not going to name names, but one of our customers didn't understand that we hadn't just decided that we weren't going to serve them. And she said that I hope that you get COVID to me.
Thank you.
Email. Yeah, I was like, I will continue to try to find a way to serve you, ma'am. And I do feel terrible. But when it happened, it was pretty jaw dropping. We quickly made the decision, we're not going to go rogue. Like that's a very silly, very short-term strategy.
Yeah. And
we want to be regulated. We want to be a compliant entity. So this is very painful. I will not post the drunken, angry rant that I wrote the first time, but I'll give it several days and revisions to make it better. And what was funny is I remember we have a tremendous in-house counsel, Jessica, and I was talking with her and I said, Jessica, I got the craziest idea. If the issue is self-employed, what if we employ these people? And she said, that is the stupidest idea that you have had in a long time. And in retrospect, it turns out that the model we would find, which was the PEO model, kind of looks like that. You're kind of co-employing them. You're not really employing them. But we said, okay, we're committed to affordable health insurance for all. I have hired a bunch of missionaries, not mercenaries. And I'm not allowed to be like, well, I guess we're a premium services play and, anti-cancer, blah, blah, blah. So it had to be around affordable health insurance. We looked at different ways you could band groups together. We first looked at, well, what can we do given, this regulatory crackdown? Because it wasn't about us. It was about the retraction of these expanded powers. We said, all right, we can serve small businesses in one industry and no self-employed. And I just did math to give that one a real credence. Realized that we would have had to spin up about 50 different trusts in order to cover 80% of industries in Texas. And that sucks not only because it's a lot of work, but it sucks because the nature of insurance, what you want is the law of large numbers. So if I had spun up 50 different trusts like an idiot, and I was tempted for a bit, a good year might have looked like 40 of them didn't spend more than they brought in, but 10 of them popped like overcooked kernels of popcorn. And that just felt terrible. Nobody wanted to do that. So we said, all right, first, we hate this industry constraint. We need to find something that doesn't have this industry constraint. And we started looking at the PEO model. And this is where there was another dose of luck. I'm sure both of you had this experience where as you're trying to figure things out, it's like you're wading through water and just hoping you can get to dry land. And then in retrospect, it appears to make sense. I remember when I was like, okay, I think this PEO model will work. And I was soft pitching it to some employers because I usually do that when I'm trying to figure out, are we onto something or not? And I remember they said, well, doesn't that require you to do payroll? Like, do you know anything about payroll? And in that moment, I was like, oh, yeah, actually, I was the growth lead for Gusto. And I hired 5 people from there. So, yes, of course, we're very locked down. And it turned out that this story appears to make more sense. I want to brag about the new model because I think it's fucking awesome. So, when it was less about can we find a kickboard to take us through these raging waters and more about, okay, we've passed through a big wave. There's a little bit of sun on the other side. Let's look at this thing. Here's what we realized. There's a really robust and regulatorily safe PEO model. So we're no longer kind of on the driftwood that was the self-funded, trust plan relying on new federal rules. And I don't regret that, but PEO is a lot more robust. There's multiple billion-dollar public PEOs. The second thing is all of them with national ambitions partner with an existing health insurance company, and they pass the majority of the economics of the health plan back to the health insurance company. So whereas the normal buying motion is somebody goes, at least in white collar spaces, they say, I want affordable health insurance. And then somebody goes, oh, actually JustWorks solved that problem for us. They're a lot more affordable than, the other options that I found. So they go to JustWorks and they say, I want health insurance. By the way, what's a PEO? Like that's how this normally works, right? And so we said, we've already done a lot of the hard part. We've got this health insurance company. We're the only PEO that instead of partnering with a big health insurance company and passing those economics back, is keeping that in-house as a profit center. And the reason that matters is because every other PEO with national ambitions, I keep saying that because there's a couple like self-insured PEOs in one state. They're only legal in 3 states in the country. So there are exceptions, but they're having to pass those economics back. So the way they make most of their money is on admin fees. And a dirty little secret about TriNet is that the great majority of their money has come from just raising their admin fees in the last few years, year in and year out. Till the end of the day, people are going, man, like I signed up for the affordable health insurance, but it's just coming out of my other pocket in the form of these admin fees. And by keeping the health plan in-house, we can run a profitable business and pass on payroll basically at cost to folks. And so I think it's a superior economic model.
Yeah, and you mentioned when you had this idea, you kind of wanted to like stress test it a little bit. You went to some employers. You're just like, I'm going to soft pitch this and just see what you're going to say, which gave you probably some validation to be like, we're on the right track here.
Yeah.
In the first go around, when you were looking for like you'd kind of cleared certain legal entity hurdles, and you're like, okay, I think we're going to go into Texas because it's very business friendly. Is it right to say that you kind of not so much lucked, but like weaved your way into your first target customer freelancer? Or had that always been the ambition? Like, how did you get validation from that target customer as early on as possible?
There was less validation of the credible type on that one. I was super pissed off. Everybody on my founding team had been one and had experienced that it sucks. And enough of us are bleeding hearts that we were kind of like, look, it's the biggest problem. And so surely we can find a way to get people to pay for it, which in almost any other realm of healthcare outside of, literally health insurance, which some of them will begrudgingly accept, that would have been the death knell of this company. If we'd been like, we're going to create a wellness program for freelancers, we would have found out that they're not going to pay for that. But I think what we did is we had the problem ourselves, and we talked to a few people, but this is the nice thing about having a mission that's as fundamentally dumbed down as affordable health insurance. I had less concerns about adoption risk if we could really nail it, and more concerns about technical risk. Could we actually deliver this? And that was a good place to start, but we got so many things wrong when we just said, look, we're just going to copy paste our plans that work so well for self-employed and get them ready for small groups. There's a degree of nuance there that we just didn't get right away. And so we needed to have more conversations with employers to figure that one out. We did get lucky, Patrick. I mean, I guess to answer your question directly, I literally had a bunch of freelancers be like, I need it to be called insurance, and I want it to be cheaper than what I have now. And I'm like, would you like me to cover? And they're like, you're not listening to me. Like, it is helpful if you can say it is ACA compliant, because even though I don't know what that means, I'm very comfortable when I can hear that. Right. But, that people realize this is something that beyond a certain level of dollars coming in, they do need. And so we did get kind of lucky from that regard.
So to this point, we've basically been talking about like, how did you weave your way through the regulatory environment and like actually get to where the heck you needed to go? But you're kind of like, you're a growth guy at heart. So you got this whole other side, which we're just now talking about, which is like, how the heck did you actually get folks to buy this thing? What did that look like at day one? I like, did you partner
Yeah,
with brokers at day one? Did you just
we
have like,
were. And then that was the best decision we've made from a distribution standpoint, which came from a bunch of conversations. What's funny is this. So I have a couple friends because they were health insurance brokers at Gusto. And when we started talking to brokers, it wasn't about, will you sell our plans? It was about, you will pull no punches when you tell me all the ways that this plan sucks. So, Nick Palukas at Gusto, I need you to get on the phone with me and talk about this. And a conversation with a broker where you just give them free rein to tell you all the ways that your idea is stupid is worth 10 conversations with early customers, because brokers know exactly what they can sell and their time is money. So that's where we started. Is I didn't know if we'd be able to sell through this channel, but we got our asses kicked by brokers that said two things. They said, here's all the reasons your plan is stupid. And then they said, by the way, please don't be one of those idiotic California companies that thinks that they can just come in and disrupt the broker without actually realizing the relationships and the work that we've got. And I literally crossed out my plan to be one of those California companies, because we were totally going to do that. And I think this is the best thing we could have done for two reasons. One, the math. When you can create an outsourced sales organization, you can scale more quickly. And obviously I have to prove that, but it's starting to look like that's the case. The other is just the immediacy of feedback. When people are starting to put a little of their time your way, I can get one of our top 10 brokers on the phone and kind of go, we are thinking about rolling out something new, and I really want your blunt feedback on if you can sell more of it than that thing you already have. So they've become sort of advisors for the company almost, in making sure we don't miss a step meaningfully. And actually, it's been really interesting with the PEO model. We've had a ton of conversations that started out with, Nick, maybe we can sell this, but I got to tell you, I'm used to taking people off of a PEO. Like I see a PEO come in and I know how to pitch. You're not getting the personalized service that you need, blah, blah, blah. And the only reason that I'm feeling really confident that these people are wanting to sell is obviously they're starting to ask us for quotes. They like what they see. But before that, I was just listening to them instead of trying to argue. And that's something that I've tried to learn again and again. And I realized that all the things they were complaining about PEOs were the things that, without me realizing it, we had set out to solve. So I'd say, okay, yeah, I get it. Well, you're used to winning business from PEOs. How do you do that? And they would say, oh my God, well, do you know about admin fees? And I was kind of like, oh, all right, maybe there's something here. And then they'd say, and these fuckers, they don't realize my value, and they're just trying to steal my clients, and then they're not going to pay. And I was like, it's like one of those first kiss moments when you're on a call with one of these brokers and you're like, I'm going to ask a question, but I'm terrified that I'm not going to get the answer that I want. I was like, are you saying that if there was very low admin fees and we paid you more than you would make in a standard health insurance transaction, you'd consider selling us even to companies that didn't know they were looking for payroll? And they're like, yeah, I mean, if the payroll is basically free, I think I could do that. And that became our strategy.
Very cool. And so when you guys, I mean, when you guys were just focused on the self-employed market, were you getting most of those customers from the association itself? How did it work back then?
No, the association was what's a fair way to put this? There was not a lot going on in the association, but what we did, and this is probably a repeatable pattern that definitely came from my growth background. I said, okay, we've made a commitment to have the lowest rates compared to other major medical health plans. And it turns out that if you can get into any online UI that sells major medical health plans right next to each other, the default sort, because this is what consumers have demanded, is that it goes from cheapest monthly premiums to most expensive monthly premiums. So we said, all right, the next thing we need to do is find online channels where we can sell a major medical health plan that use the sort of least to most expensive, because then at least we'll show up. And the single best broker for us, it's kind of weird, they're a broker that runs an exclusive private health exchange for the Texas State Bar. So, put yourself in my shoes. I'm like, I'm pretty sure what we're doing is legit. And we haven't yet hired a lawyer to vet it out, but I feel good about it. And I'm like, why don't we just try to sell it to every single lawyer in Texas? And, a large chunk of our members, and they were happy members, came from that partnership. And so a lot of it was just, since we have established this advantage of lower rates, how can we get eyeballs? And I think we're on track to do something similar in the small group space, although the buying decision is more complicated. It's not you go on the website, you just click the cheap one and buy it.
And those exchanges early on, were they easy to get on?
No, I need to come back to Molly here, actually, on a couple fronts. So we were able to partner with HCA, which is the biggest hospital system in the world before we had any members. We were able to partner with Costco Health Solutions, which is their PBM service, and we're by far their smallest client. And we were able to get on some of these, exchanges. I like to think that the rest of us bring 20% of it to the table, but a lot of it was her showing up and being like, I know how this part works. I am working with, Nick and Richard to make this the right plan. Here's why we think it's the right plan. And she did contracting, mostly with providers, but with a variety of different entities for about 10 years. And so she's compelling. And I think that she gets a lot of credit for that. And then Marshall, who is my amazing VP of sales and marketing, who we stole from Gusto. I love Marshall because, and I think this is relevant to anybody starting something in healthcare, you kind of put yourself in one of the two polarities. You're either an expert, which is awesome if you are, but you'll know if you are, or you have to admit what you don't know and find a way to make people want to work with you anyway and see that there's a future promise. 70% of health tech entrepreneurs that I see coming from HBS or coming from tech, they fall into this very poisonous middle ground that I think of almost as a moat, where they're not willing to say, like, there's a bunch of stuff that I don't know. And what happens is the healthcare system spits you out. If somebody meets you and they've been doing this for 20 years and you sound like a jackass, and I know this because I did several times, they're probably not going to want to take another meeting unless you sound something like, hey, I'm looking to learn from you. There's a lot that I don't know. Here are some things that I'd love to learn from you. But the hubris that sometimes accompanies early stage tech, particularly in the Bay Area, it doesn't always play nicely with that. I think had I done this for my first startup, I don't know if I would have been able to make those words come out, but it's really important to figure out how to make those words come out.
That makes sense. I know we're 3 minutes out. This has been awesome. Thank you for peeling everything back.
Thank you so much.
I like you guys, and it's fun to talk about this. So happy to do it.
So here's my last question real fast, which is, if you weren't working on Decent and Cheesent, but you wanted to work in healthcare, like, what other problems are you like, man, this has to be solved and I would love to see somebody solve it?
I'm just going to say Schmeesent in a different way, because this is, we haven't earned the right to do it yet. Portable benefits is a huge, massive gap. And the reason it's connected to Decent is I can see a world, I don't know if we can create that world, but I can see a world where if you want people to be able to keep a health insurance product when they go from job to job, which is super important, because if you can create that, then suddenly you can start rewarding people for doing things that will keep them healthy, but it might not pay off for 5 to 7 years. You can actually create a product, if I know that my retention is 10 years in health insurance, that looks like a chubby guy like me and says, hey, we're going to get you a health coach because we've run the numbers and we think that in years 6 and 7, that's going to pay off for you. That requires portable benefits, because right now in this country, for weird World War II reasons, your insurance is connected to your employer. And I think we can get there halfway by having a co-employer in the form of a PEO that's happy to accompany you on your journey one step to another. It doesn't solve the whole problem. I will answer your question also a little bit in the abstract. Like, I believe that if you're not directly taking shot at one of those misaligned incentives, you may be building a company that's successful, but I don't think you're building a company that's interesting. And so I would look at, if you want to apply the learnings of technology to healthcare, then find a way to untangle one of the misaligned incentives that has thus far made it impossible, and you'll have your why now, and you'll have a right to win.
Love it. Thank you. I mean, very heavy regulatory side.
Yeah, like regulatory. That's kind of why I stuck to it. I don't know that I got a lot of it seemed kind of like preordained in the retelling.
Like it was
like, it was like, okay, well, I mean, I get this. So Nick saw incentives he didn't want to follow because he didn't think he could build anything transformative if he followed those. So that precluded certain entities. So I can't be in a health insurance company because I'm subject to the medical loss ratio. Okay, I get that. Then it was, I have to be cheaper. Well, sorry. Then the second was, I have to steer. Well, what are the most powerful steering mechanisms in healthcare? It's the front door of healthcare. It's primary care. So primary care needs to be at the center of that. That's how we got, like, fortuitously to DPC through Molly. And so that, like, to me, learning number one is be really purposeful with how you build a team.
Yeah.
especially in healthcare. And I don't think you need to necessarily be building a health plan to have that mindset.
Yep.
I kind of wish that I had asked, so how'd you meet Molly? Like, how'd you get there?
Yeah.
But maybe we can have Molly on and we can ask her.
Right. My learning zero, or like even before that one, because I agree with that one, but my learning zero was, if you're gonna do anything in healthcare, you better fucking be mission driven, right?
Or I liked the thing he ended on, which is learning driven.
Yeah, but like I mean, he's very clear. Like, we are missionaries, not mercenaries.
Yeah.
And I think he seems very clear on why that is the case, which is like, you're just never gonna make it in this space if you're not.
Because it's so grit intensive.
Yeah. And then so like for us at the studio, I'm like, yeah, okay. So like, you really have to take on only work with founders that are mission.
Filter one, are you mission driven or not?
Yeah. Which I think so far that's actually like all we've been working with.
Well, because I think if you actually focus on first time founders that are domain experts or have earned that secret,
right,
they don't have to leave whatever they're leaving.
Right. So that to me was like learning zero. Learning one was the
build a team very, very, very deliberately.
Yeah, based off of the business. I was really interested in like, it was funny. I was connecting dots in my head, and I connected them incorrectly to start. And if I would have connected them correctly to start, I would have asked other questions earlier. Like, he went through this whole regulatory, how it came to be and what was required, and how they started at day zero. And in my head, I was like, okay, so like, he hired his CTO blockchain guy, he hired Molly, he hired Richard. In my head, it was, then he hired a lawyer.
Oh, yeah.
Later in the conversation, he was like, our in-house counsel. I was like, yeah, I totally got that right in my head. I'm like, yeah, he had that lawyer. And then a little bit after that, he's like, but then like, we didn't have a lawyer for a really long time, so we were just kind of making it up that like, we're going to go after lawyers now. And
I'll have to listen back on the recording, because I thought he was speaking to a very specific component of the plan. I mean, like, if he didn't use legal up until that point.
Well, I don't know if he used. I mean, I'm assuming he used some amount of legal
or vetted something.
Yes, but he did not. He said like, we had. He had enough open questions that he was like, having lawyers look at this is going to be fun.
Either we're babies or we're missing something, because making the leap to, okay, not a health insurance company, so to a third-party administrator, to let's pick the most favorable state according to business regulations. I'm like, whew.
Yeah.
I would be dialing 1-800-lawyer and be like, sorry, I have some questions for you.
Right. 1-800-lawyers, a Michigan company.
You had to get it in.
It's based on Southfield.
Okay, you got it in. There it is, Michigan, everybody.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the luck to me was, I get the Trump regulation. It wasn't. Well, actually, sorry. That's another learning is, I love the phrase, but like, devil's in the details of, we're talking probably like a few lines of regulatory language opened this opportunity up for him.
That's true.
And that's wild.
But I think like his reaction to that was also, if those few lines weren't there,
something else. Yeah.
Yeah. So,
but it was this.
Right. It was, or at least it was until it wasn't.
Yeah, it was until it wasn't. I thought the broker dynamics were fascinating. Yep. And just very much echoes everything we've ever heard and learned about brokers.
Yep.
Chronically undervalued.
Right.
Chronically underestimated. Yeah. Pay them. Right. That one just obvious. Like, don't take away their income.
Yeah. I am actually like, I'm so curious to see how the PEO goes, because I think about my mom, and I'm as a broker, and I'm like, would she be able to sell that? Like, would she be able to sell to a company like, here's some insurance, but also rip out your payroll in order to do it?
There's enough detail that I don't know. Does that also mean, and when you do so, your employees will be technically employed by the PEO?
They're like co-employed, I believe.
That he said they're co-employed, um, which sounds like just weird enough
Yeah.
to raise eyebrows. Um, but if it does mean that you get reduced, I guess the buying decision would be based on, at least in Decent's case, healthcare cost reduction.
Yeah, it is. But you're probably because now I don't know. This is my hypothesis of like what's going to happen is, well, these are small businesses. So the small businesses are probably not, they don't have an HR team probably. Maybe they have one person who works on HR, but it's probably like HR and finance, or it's like just the CEO, like the president, the person.
Yeah, they lean
in
on their
charge.
broker pretty heavily.
And so that person does control the payroll as well. So that then I'm like, well, maybe it's less important because that person can be
because
like,
the decision maker is the same person, and they can
yeah,
just
because like in a
"Yeah,
larger
okay."
org, right? Like the finance team,
Right.
like, what the fuck are you taking away my payroll for? We use this company on purpose.
Right. Yeah, I just don't know a lot about PEOs.
No, I don't either, and that's why I'm like, I don't have the answers on those. I'm very curious to watch how it plays out. I think
Yeah, I
that's
thought it was cool about him identifying the fact that it's usually a pass through for existing PEOs, and like, oh, we can turn that into a profit center so that we can cut fees and more or less undercut the market.
Mm-hmm.
That's super fun.
Yep.
I wish I could have been in the room on that.
His Gusto experience played very well there.
Oh yeah, for sure it did. Actually the don't be a dick thing. Like,
yeah,
that's also another filter.
I think we're very well situated for that. Like,
we have perfect experience for that.
Yeah, don't be a dick and don't have the hubris. Like,
right, right. I don't think we're in danger anytime soon of that one.
No, totally. I'm fairly confident on that.
But we can cut that through potential founders if put them through that filter.
Yeah, like it's funny. Like it does remind me a little bit of a fraternity or something. You're like, do you know the secret handshake? Do you know how to talk about this stuff? Right? Like it's like Molly was the Sherpa because she knew how to talk about that stuff.
Yeah, we have to have her because he said she's compelling. And in contracting situations with network partners, I'm like, what makes someone compelling or not?
Right.
Is it the credibility of the plan that they represent, or
that
just they know the language?
Yeah.
Which actually, to reference a call we had recently or earlier today with someone I won't name, he said a lot of the big players today are super wary of startups
because you're getting pitched all day long.
They're getting pitched all day long, and they're specifically not building the right way.
Yep.
So I guess that is compelling if you're actually building it the right way and you know the ins and outs.
In some ways, like looking back on our past lives, it does feel like MarTech circa 2015 when there were 10,000 MarTech companies all pitching the Fortune 500 brands. And it's like, there's a million and a dozen or fewer of them actually mattered, like actually moved the needle. Everything else was just like noise. Exactly. Yeah. And I feel like HR benefits, like those teams, brokers, those teams are probably getting to the same point where they're just constantly getting pitched and most of it is noise.
But it feels like it comes down to a few things, which is language, process, and relationships.
Yep.
You got to speak the language, you have to know the process, and you have to have the relationship. All of that is a sliding scale. You could have let's say you're a startup founder, you have the relationship, thus someone has the capacity to teach you the language or the process. But even then, like, you're drawing on their well.
I mean, like if you have the relationship, you fake it until you make it long enough, right? Because you have the relationship. You're like, let's start, let's go, let's pilot, and then you use that as your learning opportunity.
Well, but you have to make sure
language
that
and process.
the relationship can accommodate your total
Yeah.
lack of knowledge.
Yeah.
But like, if you could solve those three things, then you're in. Otherwise, massive walls in front of you
Right.
to get into the healthcare kingdom.
Right.
So, yeah, back to hiring. Important. Get an insider.
Get the Sherpa.
Yeah. Or make sure a studio you work with has a Sherpa.
Exactly.
Yeah. All right.
Cool.
Cool. Well, that's that.